Hey, recruiting enthusiasts, I'm Priyanka, and welcome to Tech Recruiting Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for gaining all the insider knowledge about the top recruiters in the tech industry. On this week's episode, we have Prithveesh with us, who's the Associate Director of Global Talent Acquisition at Biocon Biologics. Over the course of his career, Prithveesh has gained a great deal of experience and knowledge in the industry. Welcome to the podcast, Prithveesh. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, and it's wonderful being here.
Yeah, so how are you doing today?
Doing very well. I think after a couple of days of rain, the weather looks good. I'm looking forward to the weekend and the great year ahead.
Great. I'm delighted to have you here as well. And so to start off, can you tell us a bit about, yourself and how you got started in this industry? And I'm curious to know like your favorite aspect of the industry and what drives your passion for it as well.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the opportunity, Priyanka. I'm a local Bangalorean, born and raised here in Bangalore. Did all my education here. Soon after my MBA, I joined TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, an IT services and consulting firm. Spent a good 15, 20 days understanding about HR and different aspects of HR, and took up a recruiting role. I used to hire straight off campuses and also had a brief stint hiring lateral talent as well. I've moved around quite a bit within HR, worked as an HR business partner, also worked with the corporate HR office on talent management and organization effectiveness. Post which I moved to the US, spent 5 years heading HR for a specific region for TCS, and I then took up a talent acquisition leadership role ensuring growth for our North America business. Post which I moved back to India, spent a brief stint as managing HR for one of the TCS's business units, and very recently joined Biocon Biologics. Here, I'm part of the TA leadership, leading global talent acquisition projects that really impact business as we're growing. Biocon Biologics is on a clear growth path, and I think this is an exciting time for me to deliver value to our business stakeholders and to HR as a team. I strongly believe this is exciting times as we build our teams. As I'm building my own team here, working with some of the finest leaders, we'll be on a very clear path to deliver value to Biocon Biologics.
Awesome. And you've had a really great and interesting journey, and I'm eager to hear and learn more from your experiences. So, it's unlikely that, recruiters know everything about, every role they hire for. And they sometimes like lack the technical, knowledge necessary to answer the candidates' questions and, understanding the technical job specs and explaining it to the active as and especially the passive candidates is like quite a challenge, I would say. So when you're trying to like sell to the passive candidates for niche tech roles, I think you might not like have all the answers to their queries, so it becomes like a bit tricky to like excite them further and convert. So what are your thoughts on this, and like any tips you can share from your experience on like how to effectively improve the situation?
Sure. As in, having been in the tech recruiting space for the last for a decade or so, something that clearly calls out for me is, as long as you're in tech recruiting or recruiting in general, as long as you have passion and curiosity for tech or the subject matter that you're into, I think things become a lot more easier. When I started off as a recruiter, of course, 12, 13 years back, I was very fortunate to kind of get that foundations right. One is to have your subject matter expert knowledge, so to speak, as a recruiter. Second is to be very close to technology, new age tech, working very closely with your business, sitting every day with your hiring managers, your interviewers, your leadership, and getting a sense of what are they doing, why is it important for them, why is this skill or this demand extremely critical. I think those are some aspects that as a recruiter, you need to get your fundamentals right. And I think a lot of companies today have been able to crack that to a great extent, where they bring entry level, recruiting talent, or when talent moves, they spend a lot of time giving them business context, giving them a deep dive into what is the demand, why is the skill so important, why is this technology so important, so on and so forth. So I think another thing that I'm very keenly focused on is, and when I'm building my own teams, and when I hire recruiters into my own teams, one attribute that I really look at is the person able to, one, be very strong in what he or she is doing. At the same time, can the person understand surface level knowledge about the skill or technology in general? So I'm
Yeah.
essentially, when we develop Ninja developers today, why can't we have T-shaped Ninja recruiters as well? So what a T-shaped Ninja recruiter essentially means is, one, you have the depth of skills as a recruiter. At the same time, you're also developing technology skills that sits on the top of your base skills. So that's essentially what you mean by your T-shaped Ninja recruiter. So as long as you're able to build yourself into that, understanding technology, job descriptions or specs, and articulating that to your candidates, be passive or active, becomes a lot more easier. Probably a few other aspects that has worked really well with me is, and when I talk to my teams, and for myself, even today after 12, 13 years, I spend a lot of time on some open source, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, where these are easy access to technology landscape, to new age technology demand that's there, right? So as long as you're
Mhm.
spending 15 minutes per day understanding what's going on in the industry and why is this more relevant, you're more informed. You have more business context to what you're talking to the candidate. And at every levels, right? If you talk to an entry level person right off campus, or you're talking to somebody who has spent 5, 6 years in the industry, or to somebody who's spent more than 10 years, 15 years in the industry, you have to be very clear on how you pitch to these candidates in terms of the kind of background that you're with, right? So it's
Mhm.
very easy for them to tell you, hey, you know this. It's great that I'm talking to a recruiter who knows the fundamentals of the skill or the technology that you're referring to. So I think as long as you're able to do that, I think it brings more clarity, more sense to the overall engagement when you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, and I think one thing which you said was like be close to the hiring managers, have a one-on-one discussion about like understanding the role and the job description and getting the fundamentals right. That's really great, and getting the deep dive about like the roles, the skills in tech. And I like the T-shaped ninja recruiter approach as well. And yeah, the recruiter, they need to be updated and very clear about the role and know their stuff, so that the candidates also feel like okay, they're valued and they're talking to someone who knows their stuff. And so, yeah, so I want to talk to you about, engaging with qualified candidates, because really good talent are often approached regularly by, recruiters, all the recruiters, making it harder for your own messaging and email to stand out. And in addition, I think the candidates with hard to find skills are often like considering several job offers at the same time. And you need to like put the extra effort into like persuading the passive candidates to like choose your company over, your competitors. So how do you go about the entire candidate engagement strategy, and like any tips or examples you can share with us from your experience so far?
Yeah, indeed. Some very interesting times, right? Last 2 to 3 years has seen a massive shift in
Right.
the way talent is, engaged and attracted right at that stage. And of course, we're all privy to the way there's a boom in the talent. Talent knows much more today than before. And
Right.
you have to be very, very strongly able to kind of engage at that level. So I think few things that really comes out is, TA or HR in general has, and it's high time that we become better marketeers than before. When I say better marketeers, I think it's all about keeping it simple, focusing on the content and the context and articulating it very effective, right? As in, you might do the best of your branding visually through your PR teams, etc. But as an individual, how can you really get into the hearts and minds of individuals, and especially very critical talent, hard to find talent, like you rightly said, where they have so many options today.
Yeah.
So I think my view on this is, I don't think we are at the stage wherein we go and tell them, hey, this is the role, this is the level, this is the salary, this is what you'll do, right? As in, I think as before you get into all of that, I think it's important you engage a candidate with a high demand skill
Mm.
based on the kind of work that the person will do. And that comes to what we just spoke before on having very sound knowledge on your business, on the skill, on the work, by being very close to business. So as long as you have that, you've got that right, it becomes easier to kind of engage, especially passive candidates. And it takes about 15-20 minutes of an informal conversation, and then slowly bringing them up to speed on why you're essentially talking to them, and then bring your contextual knowledge there. And that really impresses someone who's talking to you, rather than just call and say, hey, I'm so and so from this company, I'm calling you for a role, this is the salary, etc., which is very, very standard, very conventional, so to speak. But if you have to break that and be a guy whom they'll be, will be very quickly attracted to, you have to talk the business language. You have to talk that as though you are hiring for that as a hiring manager, and then bring in your recruiting hat, right? So that's one. Second, you exactly need to know where the talent is, right? And it all depends on the role. If you're hiring for, say, for example, an iOS developer with, say, about 7-10 years of experience, who knows the industry well, apart from being tech savvy, you need to know where these guys are exactly sitting and where are they being engaged. They may or may not be in on a LinkedIn, or
Yeah.
they may or may not be on another platform. But for all you know that iOS developers, for example, are sitting in groups where they are actively solving problems. They're giving solutions to their peer groups. They are brainstorming about the future of iOS development, right?
Hmm.
As long as you can identify those groups, it might be a group on WhatsApp, it might be a group on Telegram, or it might be a group on Slack or wherever, right?
Yeah.
You get in there, make your inroads, get to know them, engage at a certain level, and then put in your pitch,
Hmm.
saying this is why you're reaching out to. Makes a very solid impression on that individual, rather than you approaching through an email or through a Naukri search, so to speak.
Hmm.
I think that's will be the very key differentiator in how you will engage a passive and an active person. And the other thing is, of course, LinkedIn is a very powerful tool, and as long as you have access to the recruiting module, your Boolean searches, your how do you get closer to the talent that is already engaged in the brand is extremely critical, right? As in,
Yeah.
somebody who knows, for example, a Google, who's highly engaged in Google in different forms, and your ATS, your AI is going to tell you this today in the form of insights and data. It's a much powerful way of engaging than core searches, which has been time and tested. It's been done for the last 20-30 years, right? But today's
Yeah.
time is all about how do you reach out to a guy with a lot of tech-driven, AI-driven data that
Hmm.
clearly tells you the guy is an iOS developer. He's spent a lot of time in the product setup. He's engaged with the company. I'm taking an example, Google, and
Hmm.
he or she has far more inclination to join a Google than some other company. And then you make that pitch. So I think tech-backed, data-backed, insight-backed decision is very, very important when you engage qualified candidates, especially, who are very hard to find in the market.
Right. And so, yeah, I think that you've put it greatly, and like, be better marketers than before, and like, having that informal, conversations before diving in about the role, and, getting creative about your approaches. And mainly the one key thing which you said was like, doing your homework about the candidates and like where they hang out and engage with them, and making the tech driven, data decisions as well. I think that's really great. And so, I want to talk to you about the overall hiring experience, because great talent are often like they're filling multiple offers at once. So making the hiring experience a great experience is very crucial. And when a candidate is deciding between multiple offers, I think the entire hiring experience is often the deciding factor. With, I think, 65% of the candidates, they say that a bad hire experience makes them lose interest in the job. So what are some methods you would suggest from your experience to like ensure the candidate has a very great hiring experience? And can you walk us through your hiring process and like what variation of assessments have worked like best for you when you assess technical as well as soft skills?
Yeah. So I think what I'll start off here is just taking an example, right? As in, if we buy a product on Amazon
Yeah.
and that gets delivered to your home, and then you open the product, I think the first thing that you look at is, did the product meet the expectations
Yeah.
on how you'd seen it on Amazon through a mobile app or a web browser, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
data clearly says that a good percentage of people send back the products because it was one, it looked differently, or it, probably you had a different expectation about it, to finally how you got the product on your hand. So that's customer experience, right? Equating that to candidate experience, it is the same, right? It starts right from how you've probably done your first pitch to a candidate till the time you've probably made the candidate join, right?
Hmm.
As long as that initial experience to the final experience has a right balance, and it meets the expectation of the candidate is very happy with the overall hiring experience, right? Of
Yeah.
course, there's a component of the role, the compensation, was the person happy with what he or she got? All of that is bare minimum fundamentals, right? But here you're
Hmm.
talking about a layer where you equate your customer experience to candidate experience. And today, I think a lot of companies have gotten it right in terms of cracking this, wherein they go the extra mile, right from using tech and the right human interface through a combination of recruiting folks, the hiring managers, your HR ops, and different extended teams that come together to give a very seamless experience. But one thing is for sure, candidate is at the heart of everything when it comes to candidate experience, right? So I think you may
Yeah.
use the best of the best tech today. You might use AI, a combination of ML. You might have the best ATS to give a seamless experience. But what is very, very important is how do you communicate? How transparently are you communicating, and how consistent you are
Yeah.
in doing what you're doing? So it's not just about the recruiter doing all of this, but the entire organization philosophy when it comes to attracting talent and hiring talent has to be top notch, right? As in the leader to your hiring manager to your recruiter should believe that the talent that you are bringing in is the most critical talent, is the most important talent, and rest everything will fall in place. Today you might use the best of the best ATS that will enable a person to fill out a resume in about 2-3 minutes of time, or probably complete your interview process in about 20 minutes of time using asynchronous or any other the best tech tools that you have today. Or
Hmm.
you might be able to about assess entry level talent, probably about 150,000 entry level students on one go in about 90 minutes time.
Okay.
You reduce all those kind of scalability issues. You might do all of that, but if you don't have a well built in communication strategy, keeping it very transparent and ensuring that you follow the right timelines when it comes to getting talent into the organization, nothing else would matters, right? As in what we've tried in the past and what has worked well for us, and what I've heard from some of my close friends in the industry is, of
Hmm.
course, assessments are very important at every level. For entry level, you might choose like a formal assessment where you assess people on aptitude or logic, or their personality patterns, etc. To a mid-level talent where you focus more on competency and what kind of competencies they come with, and your senior leadership where you essentially are looking at leadership potential, personality traits, and all at that level, right? So while we have all of these, and there are enough companies today doing their best with these kind of products, what is important is what works well and what is the right approach for your organization or for your company. I think that diagnosis, that approach, and zeroing on this is the right thing for us to do is what is important. And I think you need to have the right brains to come to do that before, say, rolling out any tech platform which enables you to do that. So that's something that I wanted to share. And also, I think today hiring experience is not about sending an offer letter in 24 hours timeline, right?
Hmm.
It's all about how do you follow that entire throughput till the time he or she joins, so that also says that what is the kind of experience that you're giving. And especially in the last 2 years, when a
Yeah.
lot of companies have done it virtually, initially a lot of us had troubles in doing it, but over the course, I think some companies went extremely tech. Of course, looked at models like the metaverse, where you're able to give them a virtual tour,
Hmm.
have virtual coffee, enable those perks even before they come and join us. Like, I know a friend of mine was talking about giving out, say, a Mac even before the person accepts the offer. A lot of exciting stuff, right? But essentially, as a company, you have to be sure that this is what will help me, rather than replicating or copying, options that has worked for other companies, right? So I
Yeah.
think as long as you've got that, I think you'll probably crack the problem of the hiring experience thing.
Yeah, I think you've given a really fantastic answer. And, like I really liked the part where you said like equating the customer experience to, candidate experience. And I think the main key which you have mentioned is consistency and, keeping the candidate experience as a priority and having that well built communication strategy and always being transparent to the candidates is, really key. And mainly analyzing what works for your organization and strategizing accordingly and following up from the start till the end with the candidates, from the initial application process till the onboarding. Yeah, I think those are really some key points which is going to help a lot of folks, to prioritize. And so I want to talk to you about, building a very strong employer brand. We know it's very crucial, and a good employer brand, I think, really helps you attract and engage with better candidates. But I think it's a very complex process because it includes anything from like ensuring a positive candidate experience to like promoting, your culture on social media. So it's a very continuous collective effort, that requires you to like step out of your usual duties and secure the buy-in from your coworkers. And I think companies usually struggle when it comes to communicating their culture and mainly hesitate in being transparent. So, what are your thoughts on this? And can you share some insights with us from your experience on like how companies can do better and what kind of initiatives have worked well for you so far when it comes to like building the brand?
Sure. I think I'll probably talk more fundamentals and basics, which I feel can be a great enabler for a strong employer brand. Again, I'm going to bring in a couple of tech and non-tech versions of it, so that it makes sense, right? As in today, I think we have the finest of finest PR and marketing teams that work with us to articulate and kind of amplify the culture that the company stands for, both internally and externally, right? As in,
Hmm.
though internally it resonates so well because the workforce is part of your ecosystem and they are much more closer to accept and acknowledge company culture. It becomes all the more difficult for you to kind of articulate this to your external market, which is your candidates, at some point in time because they're not closer to you in some sense. So receptivity and comprehending what you're trying to say becomes difficult to a certain extent.
Hmm.
So while you continue to kind of amplify brand, communicate, articulate your culture, what you stand for, where are you investing, why is it important for you to come and join us, etc. Some fundamentals that will really hold all of this together are probably these things, and this is what has worked well for me, for the companies that I have worked with, for the teams that I've worked with, where it becomes so important for you to look at brand. So one is, in whatever you do, deliver as promised, right? As in,
Hmm.
while you're promising something on the social media or otherwise, deliver in accordance to that, right? You might be a TA guy, you might be an HR person, you might be a business head, or whatever, right? In whatever you communicate and whatever you do to your candidates, deliver is what you promise through your value statements, through your culture statements, etc. So that's very, very fundamental. And as long as you're able to do that, I think it sets that rock solid foundation or an expectation in the minds of candidates saying, hey, this is the company that is kind of walking the talk, right? Or
Yeah.
is exactly delivering what they are saying on the internet. That's one.
Hmm. Hmm.
Second, once you know that this is your USP or your value statement sort of a thing, capitalize that at every stage. And what we miss out as different teams is we focus more on the job or the role, but we essentially miss out the USP around it, right? As in,
Hmm.
for someone who spent say 10 years in another organization, why he or she has to really come and join us? And as long as you're able to articulate that USP at every juncture, I think that's very important. Second, when you brand well, don't oversell it to candidates, right? We've
Yeah.
a lot of examples where we oversell things, or we overtreat candidates with a lot of things, with perks and a lot of goodie bags and so many
Hmm.
things. But we don't want a situation wherein you show them the moon and then you drop them 35,000 feet down when they come
Yeah.
and join you, right? So
Yeah.
that's where you right expectation setting at every stage is very important, so that it's a seamless transition for someone who's spent so much time in a previous organization or who's made up his mind. his or her mind to move to your organization. So that's the third important thing. And then fourth very important thing, while you're doing so much more than your fluffy stuff that gets represented everywhere, let the content and the context appeal more to candidates than your fluffy stuff which I just mentioned, right? So that's very important. And it's all about a collaborated effort when you're talking to candidates. It's not just a TA person's role here. It's all about your key stakeholders who are looped in and who are engaged in the entire process, right?
Yeah.
So it resonates right from the CEO, making a statement on social media on what they represent, what their growth plans are, and how all your stakeholders are aligned to that, and how it kind of moves together in the engagement journey, right? And
Mm-hmm.
finally, your target pool, right? You can't, essentially talk employer brand the same way you would talk to your entry level, to a mid level, and to a senior level.
True.
You have to customize your messaging accordingly to these levels. Though the message will be the same, though the branding part of it will be the same, it's all about how do you customize it to these levels, right? So today you're talking to millennials who, who essentially want to know what's in it for me, right? So that's where your employee branding has to cater to that. To a person who spent 10 years in the industry, has kind of seen it all, and there the branding should be, okay, if I come, how do I grow, right? So
Yeah.
that's how the value statement there needs to be. To a person at a very senior level who's coming to lead businesses, to grow sales, to grow revenue, to kind of take the organization to the next level, does it resonate with his or her value statements, the kind of background that they come with, and how will they be there with us for a long time, right? So does it really kick in for them? So I think as long as we are customizing our messaging on employer branding at all different levels, keeping it very customized, I think as companies, we're doing a great job in ensuring that you're holding that culture, you're holding that brand very strongly at every level.
Yeah, I really loved the your fundamentals and how you're approaching this, and especially when where you've told that looping in all the stakeholders and keeping them involved and aligned. I think it's a bit of a tough task to do, but I think if you do, then the organization has truly cracked it. And personalization and catering accordingly to the target audience, yeah, that's key as well. And before we wrap up our conversation, I wanted to ask you, Prithvesh, so your experience in the industry goes back to nearly like 1.5 decades. So can you tell us a bit about like how the industry has changed over time? And can you share with us like any lessons you have learned that like have helped you gain new perspectives as well as like change your approach to the industry?
I think few things, right? As in, when I joined the tech industry landscape, we were at a juncture wherein it was all about getting people in at the right time and enabling business growth, right? And then
Right.
we moved to a stage wherein candidate experience, getting the right set of people with the right skills who can grow in the organization was the kind of focus. And more importantly, there was a shift wherein recruiters had to play a much wider and a much broader and a much deeper role when it comes to delivering value to business. So what we say about end to end sort of a value proposition, right? So that's when,
Mhm.
as recruiters, as TA teams, I think across the value spectrum, people saw kind of TA people taking that larger role. And also, I think the collaboration with business took a multifold effect in terms of how do you come together to make it happen. So there was no more that this is a recruiter's role, this is a hiring manager's role, this is a onboarding person's role. So I think we saw a stage wherein you come together as one HR or one organization when you represent yourself outside to the candidate community. So I think from a shift standpoint, we also saw a lot of tech getting enabled along the way. Some companies did it in kind of internally in-house sort of a technology amplification enablement. For example, TCS, when I worked for, a lot of technology amplification was happening internally. And of course, across the industry, when we look at it, a lot of good players, a lot of good products with good integration capabilities came to the market to say, hey, these are the products that we're offering, which will make your HR journeys, your employee journeys, your candidate journeys very user friendly, very seamless. Your reduction in timelines and ensuring that there is very less scope for duplicacies, fakeness, etc. in the market, right? So I think
Yeah.
that is what we saw. And then, of course, last 2 to 3 years, I don't need to mention, but I think it's no better time to be in HR, right? As in a lot of leaders have said that enough times. So, and I'm very happy that I am in this journey, being part of this journey for the last 2 3 years, where HR and TA have been at the center of everything that business does. And I think the value that HR leaders, HR teams, TA teams have got to today's business is invaluable. And this only shows the path, say, for the next 10 years, 20 years, is there's a lot more that can be done, a lot more that HR and TA can do, coupled with, tech as an enabler, and how can we realize value out of that. So I think that's been my journey. And frankly, I think we've had some exceptional talent develop over the years in HR and TA. And I've been very fortunate to have worked with some of the finest leaders and some of the finest teams that I've been able to groom and build over the years.
Yeah, I think you've had an amazing journey, and that brings us to the end of our conversation. And I had a wonderful time chatting with you, Prithvesh, and I love the insights and tips you've shared with us today. So thanks again for joining Tech Recruiting Unfiltered podcast.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. This is a wonderful opportunity. Probably the first time that I'm doing something like this. The questions were extremely engaging, and I think it really make me think and go back probably 10, 12 years in time as to what I've been party to and what I've seen, how I've learned from people, from leaders, etc. So amazing opportunity, and thank you so much.